Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jess with So Many Creations. In this video, I'm going to walk you step by step through my brand new pattern, my first release of 2024, the Julia Crossbody. Before we get into this, let me just say Happy New Year. Thank you to everyone who participated yesterday, that's right, just yesterday, in our first ever New Year's Eve mystery sew-along. I know that it was a blast. I hope you all enjoyed it as well. Maybe it will be an annual thing. I think it might. It was super, super fun. So I wanted to introduce to you, to everyone who couldn't make it, or maybe reintroduce if you were there, the Julia Crossbody. This bag is perfect for every day. It's also great for travel. This for me is kind of a travel bag. Great when you're heading through the airport or you're taking car trips. It holds all of your essentials, but it's not so big that it gets in your way. It has a crossbody strap, a nice adjustable strap right there. On the front are two hidden zippered pockets. This pocket right here on the bottom is a little bit shorter. This pocket right here is actually nice and tall. And aside from that, there's an open pocket as well. Inside there aren't any pockets, but you can always add pockets if you'd like. It has a zippered closure, and I used a really cute little zipper end. I gotta admit, I'm kind of falling in love with these, even though I didn't think they were my style. You just never know. Sometimes things change. So before we get into everything we're gonna need for this bag, I want to talk to you about domestic versus heavy duty, how to make this work on whatever machine that you're using. So we're going to discuss that in the next clip, and then I'm going to show you all the supplies that you'll need, as well as all of the pieces that I have cut. If you need the pattern, the cork, the hardware, the zipper, or any of the other supplies that you see here, you can get them right there on my website. They are all available for purchase. The only thing you won't find there are a lot of notions, because those are basic and they're kind of personal. We all have our things that we really like, right? We have our favorite scissors, rotary cutters, all that good stuff. But I'm going to show you all the supplies that we're going to need. And it really isn't a lot. This bag is small but mighty, and so is the supply list. You don't need anything special really other than your basic supplies. Definitely some 1/8 inch tape. We'll get into that as well. And then some cork or fabric for the outside and some lining fabric. Really simple and pretty easy. So if you like videos like this, don't forget to click subscribe, hit the notification bell, and give it a thumbs up. All right, let's get into sewing machines and then our supplies. All right, so let's have a little discussion about sewing machines themselves. I know that's not something that we really talk about a whole lot, at least not in the beginning of tutorials, but for this one in particular, and really for everything going forward, I kind of just wanted to do a little overview and explain to you some of my methods as well as some of my decision making when it comes to which machine I'm going to use. Now, if you followed me for any amount of time, you know that I'm a Janome girl. I love my Janome machines. I always have a Janome domestic machine. Typically, that is also an embroidery machine. But my absolute favorite is my HD9, which is a heavy duty machine. Now, that is not an industrial. That is a totally different type of machine. That is more of a commercial use type of machine. I know that a lot of people do own industrials and they use them at home. When you're using an industrial, it's kind of off limits. Like, you can do anything that you want. You can sew through leather, you can sew through heavier linings, you can do a lot of things that your standard at-home domestics and heavy duties won't do. So the difference between a domestic, when I use the word domestic, is basically any brand of your, typical at-home machine. Some of them also embroider, some of them are just machines. They usually have lots of stitches. They take your, thinner threads, depending on what you're making. You also have some different options for needle styles, for feet style. You have a lot of options when it comes to domestic, but they don't always have a motor that's going to get through all of the thick stuff. It's not just a matter of your needle and your thread choices and your feet. Sometimes it's just a matter of how strong the machine is. Now, up until today, really even going forward, I always try to make my patterns domestic friendly, because I understand that that is probably the most common machine that most of you have at home. In becoming a bag maker and really getting into bag making over the last well, it's been a lot of years. I've been doing this for about 13, 14 years, something like that, maybe even longer. My math's not always great. But in the last probably 4 or 5 years, I've really fallen in love with my Janome HD9. What I love about it is that it is a mechanical machine. It is a heavy duty straight stitch machine. So it doesn't have all the bells and whistles. It has a thread cutter, it has a needle up and down, and that's about it. It really doesn't do any of the fancy things. But for bag making, I don't really need the fancy. I don't need all the stitches and I don't need all of the bells and whistles. I need something strong that's gonna do a nice straight stitch and get through my layers. When I'm working with my HD9, I don't have to put a big thought process into what I'm sewing. I don't have all of the capabilities of an industrial, but I do have more than I have when I'm sewing with a domestic. So when it comes to this bag that we're gonna work on today, the Julia, I did make this one right here on my HD9. I did a lot of my testing on my domestic. Did it work? Yes. Was I kind of pushing the limits? Also, yes. My domestic went through the thicker layers, which are gonna be right here on the side where the pockets and the little hidden flaps are. It went through it. I'm not gonna say it was super happy about it. Right here, we have 2 layers for the hidden zipper of cork. We have a layer of cork back here. There is a zipper and there's also layers of cotton. On top of this pocket, which is now also sewn to a back piece, which is right here, okay? So this pocket is made and sewn to here. There's also a seam right here. So now I have all of my pocket seams, my front and my back coming together. Again, my domestic got through it. She wasn't happy about it. So is there some way that you can use your domestic and still use cork? The answer is yes, absolutely you can. So you might want to test out some of the thickness with your machine to see how many layers it's comfortable with. You can always just fold some scraps, go through it, try some different needles, try some different feet, even try a stronger thread. For me on my domestic, I like a 9014 Microtex needle. That works really well for me with all of my bag making. So that's where I would start. Increasing your stitch length can also help you get through some of the layers. You also want a stronger thread. Sometimes a cotton is not quite strong enough. You might want to try a polyester or just something heavier in the cotton range. The other way that you can do this, if you're still having some issues with thickness, is you can leave off these little hidden zippered flaps. Now I know to me that's kind of part of the appeal of the bag, but the bag will still work just fine and will have more exposed zippers if you don't include the little flaps. You could also, because they're cork, not put them in the seam allowance. You could cut them a little bit short. It's not gonna look exactly the same, but you do have some options. Now, when it comes to this version right here, this is done out of quilt weight canvas. So actually I shouldn't say quilt weight. It's a little heavier than quilter's cotton, but it's still a lightweight canvas. This is not by any means a duck cloth or a waterproof canvas weight. This is the standard kind of canvas that I sell on the website a lot. This one with just the cork accent and then the cork on the handle, this is a much friendlier version for your domestic machine. I still have my little flaps here for my zipper. I still have all of the same exact features that I do on the cork, but doing it in fabric, which is a little bit thinner, even though it's interfaced, definitely helped. It can be kind of tricky sometimes when you're new to bag making, not knowing all of the things that you can and can't change. Sometimes we see a pattern and we just think we have to do everything exactly the way the pattern says, and that's not true. Also for myself as a bag maker, but also as a pattern designer, I want to stick with my core audience. I always will be working on a domestic machine of some sort, but the bag maker in me wants to explore new options. I love working on my heavy duty machine. And I do know that as a business owner and, as somebody who's putting my work out there, that a heavy duty machine is just not in the budget for everybody, or maybe you don't have the space for it. So I apologize for the rambling, but I just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up on this bag. This is the first pattern I have ever designed that definitely needs a little bit more thinking when it comes to your material selection. Just remember, any bag pattern that you use, whether it's mine or somebody else's, can be made heavier and can also be made lighter. As bag makers, we have to take our skills, pull them together, and kind of make the best decisions for us and our machine. All right, so now that we've gone over all that, let's get into our supplies and the cut pieces that I have all ready to go. All right, so before we get into the pieces we're going to need for this project, let's go through the tools and supplies as well as the hardware. This bag actually does not require a lot, just your basic supplies. As I mentioned before, tape is very important. We'll talk about that in just a second. And then just a little bit of hardware. So I have my mat, my ruler, and my rotary cutter. That is how I did all of my cutting. All the pieces are rectangular and there are no templates in this pattern. For my corners, I did grab my box corner template. I do like to use that, but you can use a standard ruler and rotary cutter or scissors. That is totally fine. I just figure if I have the tool, I'm going to use it, but it's not necessary. I have my clips, of course, because I cannot make a bag without them. My basket is overflowing right now because I just restocked it. But I don't know about you, I lose these things like crazy. They are all over the floor. Someday maybe I'll find them all. Probably not. So I also have my scissors, of course. I have some marking tools. The cork that I'm using for today, one has a light backing, so I have my friction pen, and one has a dark backing, so I have a chalk pencil, and I also have my silver pen right here. I have my 1/8 inch double stick tape, and if you are not using this project is going to be really difficult for you, especially on the pockets. When we get to the front pockets right here, it's going to make your life so much easier if you have double stick tape, or DST as you will see it referred to in the pattern quite a bit. I like the 1/8 inch. I just find that it holds just as well as quarter, but it doesn't get in my way. It doesn't gum up my needle because for the most part, I'm not sewing through it. So that is what I'm using. If you have 1/4 inch, you can use it as well. I would highly recommend using 1/8 inch. This is the Warwick brand. I will put their website down here for you, or somewhere down here, wherever it ends up. This is the one that I like. You can also get some from Weft and Warp. Either one will do. As far as hardware and zippers, what I need is 3 zippers. These are 12 inch. So I just took a yard of zipper and cut it into 3 sections. I really didn't measure too carefully. If my zipper pieces are longer, that's totally fine. Longer is always a good thing. I've already got my poles on here, so I'm prepared and ready to go. And as far as the hardware is concerned, I just have a slide set. And for me, what I mean when I say slide set is a rectangular ring and a bar and ring combo. So this is a slider. That is going to make the adjustable handle. If you would prefer to make it removable, you can also add swivel hooks. That is something I did in the Margie as well as the olive pattern. Totally optional and up to you. I did not grab any rivets or my rivet setter. As you may have seen in the bag that I had in the beginning, my handle is actually riveted on. And one of the reasons is because I forgot to put it on the bag, because I do that quite a bit. But the other reason is I love to add rivets whenever possible. And I also like adding them on the handle for strength. So if you would like to rivet your handle, when we get to that point, I will talk about it. I'm not going to be using rivets in today's video. I'm just going to be sewing my handle on the way that you see on this one right here, which is actually right underneath the zipper. Because the top zipper also has an exposed end, I also grabbed a zipper end here, a little metal one. So I have my end as well as my very small screw. I'm just realizing the one thing I did not grab was my tiny screwdriver, and I will get that before I need it. So those are all the supplies that we're going to need for today. Pretty basic. Now I'm going to move this out of the way and grab all of my pieces, which I've already gotten cut. We'll talk about fusing, and then we will get into making our handle. I have all of my pieces already cut as well as labeled. We're going to go through each of these. What I also wanted to discuss before I get into that is about directional prints. Can you use a directional print with this bag? And the answer is yes, absolutely. That yardage is already factored in. So if you have a directional print like I do on this canvas right here, the amount that is called for will cover that for you. You can also use a directional cork, and you can use directional fabric on the inside of each of these pockets. It will work just fine. Some projects are not conducive to that because a lot of times in bags and wallets, we're folding things. And when you're folding something, it means something is upright and something else is upside down. That is actually the case on the little flaps right here. But because you really can't see underneath, And when you do flip it up, it ends up being right side up. I consider that a win, and I say yes to directional fabrics. I'm going to slide this out of my way, and we're going to get into all of the individual pieces. So I cut and labeled each of them on the back with a heat erasable pen. From my main fabric or cork, which is going to be my print right here, my leaf print, I cut my A piece. That is going to be for the top of the pocket right here. I also have B. B is going to be for the bottom. That's that one right down there. I have C. C is going to be for the back, or I should say the front of the bag, but it's behind this pocket. So this is the bag front. D is going to be the same size piece. It is going to be for the back of the bag. And I have my 2 E pieces. These are going to be for the flaps right here. These are not raw edge. The only thing on this bag that is raw edge is going to be the handle. And when we get into the handle, we'll talk about a few options that you have as well. All of these pieces work with fabric, and that is why I did this one in canvas, because you don't have raw edges on the main part of the bag. For my accent piece, which is going to be the accent in the center as well as the handle, I have my 2 F strips. Now again, in the pattern, it's going to tell you what size to cut these. I have cut them as the pattern notes, which is 3 inches wide. If you have any issues with your domestic or with any kind of thickness, you can cut these 2 inches wide. For today's video, I'm going to go over the 3-inch method that I like to use. Typically, in most of my videos, I go on the smaller side, but because I am using my heavy duty machine, I'm going with the wider one. If you need any tutorials on the 2-inch wide handle, I will link one above for you that you can watch if you prefer. So I've got my 2 F pieces, and then I also have G. G is going to be for the center accent right here on the front. And I have H. H is going to be for my little tab right here. That's going to be for my rectangle ring. Now H is cut at 2 inches in width versus the 3 inches, again, to reduce some bulk, because this one is going to be folded in half after it's top stitched. For my fabric, I actually mixed it up a little bit on this one, so I don't have any interfacing. The reason is I just wasn't feeling it today. I didn't feel like getting the iron out, so I decided to use my cotton. That's going to be for all of the interior pieces right here on this pocket unit, and I'm using waterproof canvas for the lining of the bag. So each of these pieces right here kind of get smaller in size. They stay the same width, but these are going to create the pockets behind the hidden zippers. I lost track of my letters. Okay, I'm at I. So I have my I piece. This is out of cotton, no interfacing. Regardless of what machine you're using, I would suggest doing it out of quilter's cotton or something lighter weight. Unless you have an industrial that can get through all those heavy layers, I would stick with this, and I did not interface it. If you want to add some SF 101 or something really lightweight, you could do that, but I'm skipping it all together. So I have I have J, the same cotton with no interfacing, K as well as L. So these are all quilter's cotton, no interfacing. This piece right here is M. M is going to be right back here. It's going to be the lining of the pocket or the backing of the pocket. And because I decided to use waterproof canvas for my 2 N pieces, they are not interfaced. You do not need to interface waterproof canvas. This right here is the back. It's the rubbery side. This is the more kind of canvasy feeling side. So that's the front. I have 2 of those for the lining of my bag. As I mentioned earlier, this bag does not have any pockets. It is just open inside because it's a smaller footprint. If you would like to add a zippered pocket or some divided pockets or whatever suits your needs, absolutely you can do that. Today, I'm going to do just as the pattern says, and I'm going to skip all the inside pockets. So now that I have all my pieces cut, let's go ahead and jump right into step 2 because we are not fusing, and we're going to start working on our handle. At all. So we're going to skip right ahead to step 2, and step 2 is prepping our handle. These 2 pieces are going to be sewn together to make one long strip, and then we're going to fold it and top stitch it. So because I have my 3-inch width, I'm going to do a tri-fold handle. And whenever you're doing a tri-fold, all you're going to do for your cutting is to cut 3 times the finished size of the handle. Because when it comes to cork, we don't have to worry about raw edges. They do not have to be finished. So since I want a 1-inch finished handle, my handle pieces are 3 inches wide. Now, if you are a quilter, this will make a little bit more sense. And if you're not, let me show you how I like to sew these pieces. So I'm going to lay one of my handle pieces right side up, right here. And I'm going to take my other one and place it right sides together. So this one that I drew my line on is wrong side up. And what I always do, still to this day, even though I've been making handles like this forever, is I double check to make sure I draw my diagonal in the right direction. So when I sew this, it's going to fold like that and make a long handle. I want to make sure I didn't draw it the wrong way, which is super easy to do. So since I have these pieces at a 90-degree angle on top of each other, right sides together, I took my little box corner template. You can also use a ruler, or you can just find your corners here. You can kind of make a mark here and mark down here where it's going to meet the other piece. And I'm just going to be using this, just like so, and drawing a 45-degree diagonal. And when I do that, that's going to become my sewing line. So I'm going to sew right on top of this line. When I'm done, I'm going to trim my seam allowance over here to about 1/4 inch. I just kind of eyeball it. I don't even use my ruler, as long as it's not too thin. And then once that is complete, I will press this seam open. I just find that it helps to lay it flat and it works a little bit better for the next part. So I'm going to stitch this, trim this down, and then I'm going to press it open and I'll show you how to do the folding, and we're going to use our tape for that. So before we get into how to fold the handle, I just wanted to mention quickly, because I did forget to mention it in the beginning of the video, in my supplies, I also have a lighter. The reason is I'm using polyester thread, and I also will get some of this on the side of my cork, this little, not fraying, but kind of fuzz, and that is just from the backing. So if I just take my lighter and very gently run it along there, it takes care of that for me. I do not use any kind of edge coating or sealant on my handles unless I am giving it away as a gift. So I just like to kind of run my lighter and get rid of any of those little pieces. They're little fuzzies, and it's just the backing fabric. It's not the actual cork. That looks a lot better. I also keep this around for my threads. So I am using the Swag polyester Tex 45 thread. I have this beautiful coral here. This is a color Coral Reef. I will be using this for the majority of my bag. Even though it doesn't have coral in it, doesn't that just look beautiful? I just love how it picked up on all the colors. For the handle, I will be top stitching in the purple, whose name is escaping me right now because it's already on my machine. So let's move this out of the way and finish up our handle. So I went ahead and I sewed my 2 pieces at a 45-degree angle and I pressed it open. Yes, I did use my iron on cork. I do it all the time. That is why we ship our cork folded, because you can iron it. If you're not comfortable with that, it's totally fine. You can press this open with your fingers and you can grab your double stick tape and just put a little bit underneath and you can hold that open. Whatever is easier for you. So now that we have this nice long handle here, perfect for our crossbody, we're going to do some folding. I like to use tape. I will also use some clips, bring those over. I have a ruler and I also have a pen. This is the silver marking pen, since I'm going to be marking on the black. Now, yes, I could definitely grab a bigger ruler, but this was the closest, so I just grabbed it. And what I'm going to do is on one side, and it does not matter which of the long sides, I'm going to measure over 1 inch, because that is 1/3 of my width. That is also my finish size. And I'm going to draw a line 1 inch from one of these long edges. And I just will keep going, draw it all the way down. So I drew my line all the way down this long edge. And now on the opposite side, I'm going to take my 1/8 inch double stick tape, and I'm just going to run a piece right along the edge. It doesn't have to be right up against the edge. It doesn't even have to be totally even. And I'm just going to run this all the way down. So there is my tape. Now I'm going to take my paper off, and I'll just take a little bit off at a time. Kind of use my fingernail to push that down so I can get the paper off. And I'm going to fold this edge to the line that I drew. I'm just going to do that. And it's just butted right up against that line. Do this all the way down. And once you have that stuck down on that side, you can use more tape, but I would prefer just to use clips for the next part. I'm gonna fold this edge over to here. But what I like to do is fold it to the other side, but back a tiny, tiny little bit. And the reason is I don't want this raw edge hanging over what I call the front. So it's just right up to the edge, but not past it. And I'll just add some clips. Again, if you want to just use another piece of tape, go right ahead. I have no idea why I like to use half tape and half clips. Just one of the things that I do. So once I have this all ready to go, I'm going to go to my sewing machine and do all of my top stitching. And I like to top stitch on all of my handles 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch from each of the long edges. I love double top stitching. That's just kind of a thing. I guess it's one of my one of my traits that you'll see on all of my bags. It makes me happy. It's what I like to do. One thing that I always will encourage you to do is, even if you don't want to do a double top stitch, just make your left and right side even. And what I mean is, a lot of bag makers, and I think it's less now, I found that it was more in the very beginning when there were less resources, they will only stitch on the open side. So they will only top stitch over here. And for me, that just doesn't look finished. Found a few more phrases. I think it looks more finished and professional if the top stitching is the same, on the left and the right. One more clip. And I also leave my selvage on the end. Cork also has a selvage, just like fabric. And I leave that because at some point I will trim that up. But for now, I don't really worry about it. So since I'm going to do my top stitching, before I head over to the machine, I'm also going to grab my little piece for my tab. And because this is not 3 inches wide, this is only 2 inches, I'm just going to fold it in half. If you would prefer to mark the center and fold your edges in, you can. My main reason for not doing it that way is because then my top stitching is different. Because then I have to top stitch in the center and then on the edge, and it doesn't look the same. And that's one of those things that will bug me. So I just fold it in half. I would rather have a raw edge and a folded edge, but have the same top stitching. You can make whatever choice makes you happy. So I have both of these ready. I'm going to take these to my machine, do my top stitching. Just like with any top stitching, I match my top and bobbin thread, and I also make sure that my stitch length is increased. On this machine, I'm usually at about a 4.5 to a 5. On your domestic, you can be around a 3.5 to a 4. I top stitched my handle as well as my tab. I did use the Grape Ape color from Saya Swag, and on the raisin colored cork, I think it's an awesome match. I think it looks really nice on here. I did my double top stitching, 1/8 and a 1/4 from each of the edges, and you can see here, I guess I kind of consider this the back because it's where that raw edge is, but the raw edge is so close to the fold, my 1/8 inch caught it really nicely. So all of my top stitching is done. I burned any of the little stray little frays that I found, except for that one. Just pull that off. And I cleaned up my edges. If you do edge coat or any kind of finishing, you're going to want to do that now, and then you can set it aside while you finish the rest of your bag. I have my little tab all done here too. One thing to note on this, I did make it extra long. It's much longer than I typically make it. The reason is I gave you the option to use rivets if you would prefer to add your handle on that way. And if you're adding rivets, you might want to tuck that piece down a little bit further into your bag. So this is how we're going to do it in today's video. Just the way the pattern says, where it's anchored at the top under the zipper. But if you want to add your handle and your tab with rivets, you can see I did trim this one down a little bit, but if you wanted to move it further down onto your bag, you have enough room. I like when my hardware is kind of up at the top. I'm getting ahead, I know, but I just wanted to let you know why your tab is a little bit on the longer side. So to finish this up, we're going to add our handle hardware. So the first thing that you're gonna do is grab your rectangle ring, and that's gonna go on the tab. Now for me, I know that I can fold it completely in half and get through these layers without an issue. If you want to reduce the bulk a little bit, you can move this back. I would say maybe 3/8 to 1/2 an inch, somewhere around there. And that way you'll only be sewing through 2 layers when you add it into your bag. It's totally up to you. For me, I'm just gonna fold it totally in half, and I'm gonna add a clip for now. At the machine, I'm gonna stitch 1/8 of an inch down at the very bottom just to hold my edges together. And then I'm gonna stitch as close to my rectangle as I can. What I wanna make sure doesn't happen is this when it's being used in the bag, and that can happen with rectangle rings as well as D-rings. So I'm gonna stitch as close as I possibly can. Again, if you wanna use rivets, you can do that. Once that is stitched, I'm going to get my handle ready. So because I have my selvage on here, I'm gonna go ahead and trim that off. Just kind of get rid of that little end. I'm gonna take my slide and I'm gonna put my handle, this is the front cleaner side. This is gonna go up and over, just like so. About 1 inch or so. There's really no exact measurement for this. Once I have this ready, I'm gonna stitch right here about 1/8 of an inch just to kind of lock that in place. We'll pretend that I've already done my stitching. Once I have that done, I'm gonna make sure my handle is not twisted in any way. I'm gonna loop my tab, which has already been stitched, right onto here. That's gonna stay loose. And I'm gonna take my other end, which still has a selvage. I'll trim that at the end when I'm ready to add it to the bag. And I'm gonna bring that up and over just like so. I can adjust it a little bit more. And now I have a finished handle. So I'm gonna undo that just to head over to the machine, get this stitched, and then we will start working on our outside pocket. Okay, quick little recap and we're gonna move on. So here is my handle with the tab. So again, on the tab, I stitched down here about 1/8 of an inch. That's just keeping my edges together. That stitching will be hidden later. I also stitched as close to the rectangle ring as I can get to make sure that it's not going to, kind of move on me. I don't want my rectangle ring to pop over in the wrong direction. I have my handle all set. There is my stitching. I just stitched about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. I looped one of my ends up and over the center, did my stitching. I added my tab, which will stay loose. And then I took the opposite end and again, I came back up and over, and now I have this end right here. I haven't trimmed my selvages just yet, but when this is in my bag, this is how it's going to look. I will be stitching this end as well as this end into the bag under the zipper, just as the pattern says, or if you want to rivet it on, you can absolutely do that. This might be a really fun place to also add some strap ends if you're going to leave the strap ends exposed and you're going to rivet it on. Just a couple of things to think about. So now that we're done with this, let's move on to step 3. For step 3, we're going to be doing a little bit of top stitching on our flaps right here. These are the hidden zipper flaps. So there's my zipper underneath. I'll go ahead and zip that up. And you can see my zipper kind of peeks out when I lift it up, but otherwise it is totally hidden. One other thing I wanted to show you is this bag. This one I made with some decorative pulls. So you can see right here, these are some beautiful rose pulls. These are from moremino.com. And even though they are on the larger side, you still see just a little bit, but most of it is still hidden. I think it just adds a pretty little extra dimension. And I use the same zipper pull on the top as well. I also was gifted a really great tag from Heartwood and Hide made at Sew Whatever Studio. Since I was visiting there last week, I got to complete a bag on an industrial machine. That's a totally different experience. And I have my cool tag and my nice zipper pulls. So I just wanted to show you how that looks if you would like to use a larger or decorative zipper pull. So in order to make these flaps, all we need to do is fold them in half, wrong sides together. I'm gonna grab my clips here. And we're just gonna top stitch 1/8 of an inch along the fold. Now, because it's cork and fabric is much easier to do, when I fold it, I do like to add some clips, because what I found is that when I just kind of take this to the machine like so, as soon as I start stitching, a lot of times this shifts on me. Can you use tape? Absolutely. A few clips for me is also gonna work, but here's what I really like to do, and I find that this helps for my next step. When I fold this in half, I actually stitch in two places. I do my top stitching, which is gonna show on the folded edge. That's gonna be right here. But I also stitch 1/8 of an inch right along this raw edge, because when I get to step 4 and we start assembling the pocket, I think it goes together much easier. So it's going to tell you in the pattern the same thing, to do your top stitching 1/8 of an inch. And if you're working with fabric, that is more than enough. If you want, and you're working with cork, or you just would prefer to, you can also stitch this raw edge closed. I think it helps. So I'm gonna go prepare these. I'm gonna grab my thread because it's time to change it out. And I will be back to show you how these look, and then we'll get started on our pockets. My 2E pieces, which are my hidden zipper flaps, are all prepared. I folded them in half, wrong sides together. I top stitched 1/8 of an inch from the folded edge, and I did also add some 1/8 inch stitching, which will be hidden later in the seam allowance along the top. That's just going to keep everything together and keep it neat. So for step 4, we're going to work on the outside front of the zippered pocket. So that's going to be this piece right here. I have my A piece, which is going to be up here. Again, my E flaps, I have my B, and then I have my accent, which is my G. So I've grabbed all those pieces along with my double stick tape, my zippers, and I also have my clips nearby. So I just want to note, as it's noted in the pattern, that some of the techniques that we're going to use may be in a different order or might be a little bit different for this pattern than you are used to. So I would say don't make any assumptions. You might think that you know the next step, and I just don't want you to get too far ahead of yourself and make a mistake that you're going to have to get your seam ripper out. That is unfortunate, but it does happen to all of us. We're going to be working on the front, which is my cork, and then we're going to be adding the pocket pieces afterwards. So I did not grab any of my fabric pieces. Those are not going to be used just yet. So what we're also going to pay attention to, and I'm not really worried with my pieces as much, I mean, I am, but I'm not, is we're definitely going to pay attention to top and bottom, especially if you have a directional print. I would say technically I do, but if for some reason one of these pieces was turned the other way, it's not the end of the world. If you have something like the canvas bag that I had, something that has a very distinct top and bottom to it, you're going to want to pay a special close attention to that. So I'm keeping my bag nearby so I can show you what parts we're working on, and we're just going to go a little bit at a time. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to grab one of my E flaps. I'm going to place the other one aside. I'm going to move my G as well as my B and one of my zippers. I'm just going to kind of get those out of the way. And I'm going to start here with my A piece. So we're going to make a sandwich with these 3 pieces and then head over to the machine and stitch. So I'm going to take my double stick tape. I find that it's the most helpful for this above clips. It just kind of doesn't get in the way. Sometimes clips are helpful, but sometimes I find that they can be just a little bit of a nuisance, I guess, because I am really concerned with keeping everything nice and straight, and sometimes things shift around when I'm using clips. So I do have them near me, but I'm going to be using as much tape as I can. So I have placed a piece of double stick tape, this is the 1/8 inch, on the bottom. That's going to be very important for all of you with directional prints. So this is on the bottom of my A piece. I'm going to take my paper off. And I'm going to place my flap. We're going to work with the flap first with the right side down. Now for me, I do have a wrong and a right side because I used my coral color top stitching thread and I used purple in the bobbin. I didn't change it out. So I want my coral to be showing. So that means this is my right side. And I'm going to place that right side down, but I'm also going to make sure that my raw edges are at the bottom right here. So I have my A, I have my double stick tape on the bottom, I have my flap right side down with the edge, the folded edge towards the top right here. And then I'm also going to add my zipper. So I can use clips, but I'm just going to grab some tape. I'm going to put another strip of tape right here, right on the bottom edge. And there we go. Get that right into position. Take my paper off. And I like to make sure that my zipper opens to the left. So I have the narrower part of the zipper pull on the left-hand side. If you want, it can be hanging off the edge for this step. It will not make a difference right now. It all depends on the foot that I'm using. And for me, I don't have to worry about it. Sometimes it's easier if it's hanging off the edge because the zipper is a little bit straighter. You get this little bit of a bow even when your zipper pull is put on nicely. So if it's hanging off the edge, that's totally fine. So there is my sandwich. I did not use any clips. Let's look at it one more time just to make sure we're all on the same page. This is my A piece. This is the top. I added tape to the bottom on the right side. I added my zipper flap E. The folded edge is towards the top. The raw edges are towards the bottom. And because I have a wrong and a right side because of my stitch, my thread color, I have my right side down. And then I have my zipper right side down. And I've aligned all three edges nice and straight right across here. So now I'm going to head over to my sewing machine and stitch 1/4 inch all the way across there, making sure that I backstitch. My stitching is done. My 1/4 inch seam is all complete with backstitching at the beginning and the end. Make sure everything is secure. Now for this one only, I am going to top stitch. For the rest of my pieces, I am skipping the top stitching until I get to the fabric. So if you want to skip the top stitching on this, you can. If you want to do it all at once and not change your foot, that's totally fine. If you want to top stitch this right now, you can. And all you're going to do is pull your zipper and your flap down. We're going to kind of push this seam so that it's going up towards the top of A. And you're going to top stitch 1/8 inch right along here, 1/8 inch from that seam. I am going to skip it for right now. The pattern says that you can, but because I have to change my foot, I'm going to go ahead and wait until the end and do all my top stitching. If you do choose to top stitch this, just remember, do not top stitch anything else as we go forward. So I'm just going to skip it for right now, but if you're top stitching, that's what you're going to do. We'll go over that again when I get to the part and I am ready to top stitch. So now that I have this, I'm going to go ahead and grab my G piece. So again, I'm going to grab my tape, and this time I'm working on the top edge of G. Obviously for this one with the dots, it doesn't matter, but I'm going to keep repeating it to make sure that it makes sense, especially if you do have directional prints. So on the top of my G, I'm going to add some tape, just like that. Peel off my paper. And I'm going to place the zipper only. So I am not touching either of these pieces, the A or the flap. I am just placing the zipper right along that edge, making sure that I line up the sides of my pieces, keep everything nice and straight. I don't want to have to trim at the end. I can if I need to, but I'm going to try as hard as I can to not have to trim. So I'm going to line up my edges on either side and get my zipper pull out of the way. It always gets stuck on the tape. All right, there we go. One little spot there. All right. This gets a little bit tricky because you have a lot of things in your way, even though you're not working with all of them. I've got the zipper pull, the flap, all of that going on. So let's take a look before I head over to sew. I skipped my top stitching. I'm going to do that afterwards. So I think it makes it a little bit easier, but I know that sometimes people like to top stitch. So I have my flap and my A kind of out of the way. Those are stitched to the top of the zipper. Now I'm taking the bottom half of the zipper, sticking it onto the top of G. So top, bottom edge, just those two, 1/4 inch, making sure to backstitch. Here's how we're looking so far. I have one zipper stitched in, one flap. I have my A and my G. So now we're going to repeat this step on the bottom here. So just like we did on the A, we're going to add double stick tape to the bottom portion of G, just like this. If you need to use some clips to kind of hold this up and out of your way, you can do so if that helps. I'll do that so you can see clearly what I'm working on. All right. So there is my piece of tape on the bottom of G. I'm going to peel my paper off. I'm going to take my second flap, again, right side down, so my coral thread is facing down. Put that right on here, aligning up the sides as well as the bottom. And then I'm going to add another piece of tape on the bottom here. My folded clean edge is facing up towards the first zipper, up towards the top of the pocket. Oops, there we go. I'm all thumbs today. I don't know why, but I am. There we go. Get that in place. Take this paper off, do the same thing. My zipper pull is on the left, it's opening that way. I'm gonna place my zipper right side down, aligning that edge. Do whatever you need to do with the zipper pull. And if you really like to live life on the edge, you can even do this without your zipper pulls on. I know a lot of people like to sew that way. I'm always afraid I'm going to forget to put them on, but you do whatever makes it easier for you. And if that means your zipper pull is all the way over on the edge, hanging off, that is totally fine. We will address that when we need to. So I've got my next sandwich. I'm going to do another 1/4 inch stitching, making sure to back stitch. So there we go. G, my middle accent, my E flap, right side down. This is the folded edge towards the top. Raw edges are at the bottom. Zipper is also right side down. So now we have our top and our middle. Let's go ahead and add the bottom. We're going to be adding the bottom of the zipper to the top of piece B, again with tape. So I'm going to grab my tape. The cork that I am using today, just a quick little note, is actually a brand new print that as of today is not on the website. This is something that will be there in the future. So depending on when you watch this video, it might already be on the website, it might not. And it doesn't have a name yet, so I can't tell you what name to look for. But this will definitely be coming in probably January or February. So I have my tape, I took my paper off. I'm gonna put my zipper right on here, line up my sides, get my zipper in place. Get my zipper pull out of the way because it always wants to stick where it doesn't need to be stuck. Okay, right sides together with piece B. And I'm going to go ahead and do my final stitching on this. Then we will grab the fabric pieces and I'll show you how to put those in and we'll talk about why we haven't top stitched. So this is how my pocket is looking. Just the front part is done. So there's my pieces back here, my A, my G, and my B. My zippers and my E flaps are sewn in. So why haven't we top stitched, or why have we only top stitched a bare minimum, if at all? The reason is when we add our pocket pieces, which I've grabbed right here, these are pieces I, J, K, and L. When we add those, we're actually going to be adding them where the top stitching goes. So we're going to top stitch and sew the pocket piece in place at the same time. If you had already gone ahead and done your top stitching, could you still add your pocket pieces? Yes, absolutely. Is it going to make a difference? Yes and no. Functionally and structurally, your bag will be fine, but you will have 2 top stitching lines. And because we would want those on top of each other, I know that sometimes our stitching, even with the same foot, same setup, doesn't go quite on top of the line that we already have. And for me, that's something that will just kind of make me a little crazy because I don't want to see 2 lines where they are almost next to each other, on top of each other, next to each other. That drives me nuts. So I figured, why not kill 2 birds with 1 stone? We will top stitch and sew the fabric in at the same time. So that's why this is a little bit different than anything you may have done before. Possibly you've done a technique like this, but I like to think that this, especially for my pattern line, is definitely a new skill. So now that I have all of my pieces ready, we're gonna start slowly adding these pocket pieces. These are the uninterfaced cotton pieces. Again, even with a heavy duty machine, I would still do these out of cotton. And what we're gonna do is, once again, use our 1/8 inch tape. We're gonna get these in place, and now I'm gonna do all 1/8 inch sewing. So I'm gonna switch my foot to my 1/8 inch compensating foot, and I don't have to switch it back out. It just makes it easier rather than going back and forth with top stitching. I just like to be a little bit more efficient. So what I'm gonna do is start with piece I, okay? I'm gonna move my pocket pieces out of the way. I'm starting with piece I, and I guess technically this would be the top of the print. They're little V's, so they kind of go like a V would go. I have my pocket right side up so I can see where I want to align it, and I'm gonna turn this piece over. I'm gonna get these clips out of the way because I really don't need them just yet. I am going to take some tape, and I'm gonna place it right along the top of the pocket, which is A. This is the first one that we stitched in. Put my tape right along there. This is replacing clips. I think it just makes it a little bit easier. And I'm going to take my pocket fabric, and my pocket is going to go right side down, okay? And I'm just gonna place that right on there. Okay. So I have not done any measuring of my pocket. I haven't done any trimming. The reason is the pocket kind of stretches a little bit because everything is kind of crinkled up right now without the top stitching. So there is a measurement provided in your pattern, which you will double check before you get to your last piece. I would say for right now, don't worry about it. We're gonna go back in and do some trimming if we need to. So on the back here, I have my pocket piece. This is I, right side down, and it's right along the top edge, right in place with tape. So because I didn't do the initial top stitching, I'm gonna do that when I head to the machine as well. So the first thing I'm gonna do is stitch about 1/8 of an inch along here just to secure that fabric. That 1/8 inch won't be seen later. Then I'm gonna move it out of my way, and I'm going to turn my piece over and do my initial top stitching that I had skipped. And again, what I'm doing is I'm pushing my flap down, and my zipper and my seam are going upright. So they're going up towards the top of the pocket. I wanna make sure my zipper is flat so that it is not getting in the way of the pull. You can see down here, if I leave that just as it is, this is gonna get caught and it's not going to make my zipper function. So I'm pushing the seam up, the flap is down. So I'm gonna stitch here 1/8 of an inch, move the fabric out of the way, and top stitch right here just because I hadn't already done it. Then I'll come back and we'll start adding the rest of our pieces. Pocket piece I is sewn in place. I stitched it 1/8 of an inch along the top just to secure it. I moved it out of my way, and I top stitched down here because I didn't do it earlier. So my flap is down, my zipper and the seam is going up towards A, up towards the top of the pocket. That's going to keep everything nice and flat and make my zipper pull open. So the purple right here is actually my top stitching. You'll see that's 1/8, and the coral color right here was the stitching of 1/4 of an inch that I had done. So now we have this part. We're gonna keep this pocket piece out of the way, and we're gonna add J. Now this is where it gets a little interesting, okay? It's a little bit different. I'm not gonna tell you it's not. This might not be a technique that ever fully is, how do I say this? It might not be something that you ever completely absorb and have to kind of refer back to. It'll make sense the more that you do it, but you might have to just keep double checking up and down and right side and wrong side and that kind of thing. For me, I still have to refer to my own pattern, so don't feel bad. Even if you've made 20 of these bags, I get it. Okay, so this pocket piece, starting with this one, we're going to be adding it and doing our top stitching. So we're kind of doing a 2-for-1 here. So on the bottom right here, on the back side of G, this is the bottom of that first zipper, and it's also the top edge of G. On the back, I'm gonna add my tape. So I'm gonna add it here because when I do my top stitching, this pocket is magically going to be folded in, hiding the raw edge, and doing the top stitching. I think it's pretty cool. It's a really neat way to do it. At least I think so. It always sounds weird to say that about something that I did because I don't want it to sound like I'm really full of myself, because I'm not. So there is my tape, okay? So the tape, again, is at the top edge of G on the wrong side. I'm going to peel this off. And my pocket is going to go right side up, just like this. Make sure my V's are going in the same direction. The reason we want it right side up is because these two pieces eventually will come together and form a pocket. But for right now, we're just sewing it in place at the top edge. So I take my pocket, right side of the fabric is up, so the wrong sides are together. And I'm just gonna align it with the top edge of G, which is the bottom of the zipper. And I'm gonna top stitch, and once I'm done top stitching, it'll look like this. Okay. We're gonna do it from back here and then I'll flip it over. So I'm pushing the zipper open, so it is this top stitching right here. So it's underneath the flap. We don't wanna catch the flap. So we're just sewing on the purple, which is the middle, right here. My top stitching is going to be 1/8 of an inch from this seam. My seams are going down towards the bottom, which is leaving my zipper open. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that top stitching. I'll be back to show you how that looks. The next bit of top stitching is all complete. So I have my top stitching up here, and next I added it down at the bottom of the zipper. So when I turn this piece over, you'll see my zipper is totally flat. That means my pull is going to move really nicely. I didn't do anything with this pocket piece. I left that alone. And this one is hanging down towards the bottom, and it's just stitched at the top. And now you can see, because I used tape and I folded it over, now it is secure and the top stitching is done. So what we're gonna do before we add the second pocket is close this up. And what you're gonna check for is to see if your bottom edges are aligned, and mine are. If they're not, just give it a trim. It's totally fine. You don't have to stress about that. So I'm gonna bring these edges together. I'll just, add a couple clips. And we're gonna sew our pocket closed. Now what you're going to do is stitch just the cotton, we're not stitching anything else, right across the bottom here, 1/4 of an inch, and then you're going to stitch your pocket all the way up as far as you can stitch it. So I'm probably gonna get to the bottom of my zipper. The reason for this is, again, to reduce bulk. So when we get to the part where we're finishing this entire pocket, which we're not there yet, we can move this kind of out of the way and make sure that we're not catching all the fabric as we're sewing. It just helps a little bit to reduce bulk. If I was not filming this, if this was not for a tutorial, I would not actually sew my sides, because I will just let them get caught, because I know that my machine can handle it. I am just showing you how to do this to help you reduce a little bit of bulk, especially if you're using a domestic. So if you are using a heavy duty machine, you don't have to sew the sides. I'm just gonna sew the bottom, and I'm gonna sew up as far as I can for demo purposes. Again, in a normal situation, not on film, I would only be sewing the bottom closed. So I'm gonna finish this up, I'll show you how it looks, and then we're gonna repeat this same process to make our second pocket. So finished zipper pocket number 1. Let's take a look again, because we're going to repeat the same steps. So I've got my top stitching from the front, my zipper is nice and flat. On the back here, my pocket is sewn in at the top. It is closed at the bottom and on the sides as far up as I could go. This should be 1/4 of an inch seam. Mine is, well, it's abstract. I was being lazy and I didn't change my foot, and it's totally fine. My sewing is not perfect, and that's okay with me. So here's my pocket. It is not attached to the front, so I can move it out of the way, which is going to be important to finish up our second pocket. So now that we're done with this, I'm just gonna kind of roll this up, throw a clip in here because I don't want it to get in my way. Now I'm going to repeat the same step with my L and my K piece, okay? So K is gonna be next. Let's grab our tape. So our first strip of tape is going to go on the bottom of G, on the wrong side again. I'm always working on the wrong side of these pieces. And that is the top of the zipper. But I'm placing my tape right here. It is tricky to see it sometimes. Just get in there. Take my tape off. So my tape is on the bottom of G, which is the top of my second zipper. I took my paper off. And now what I'm going to do with my pocket is I place it towards me right side up, but it's actually upside down as far as the print is concerned. And then I'm just going to slide it up just like this and put it on my tape, okay? So the reason we do this is, again, when this is flipped down and it's in the pocket, now my print is right side up and my fabric is in the right direction. So I have it right side facing me, but print upside down. Put that right there. And again, I'm going to turn this over and from the front, top stitch, and I'm going to press my flap down. My seam is up, so there's my seam, keeping my zipper flat. Top stitch 1/8 of an inch. We are almost done with our pocket pieces. So I did exactly what we had done previously. I folded my flap down. My seam right here, which I top stitch, is facing upwards, just like so. My pocket piece is right side facing me, print is upside down. Now I'm gonna add the last piece. Grab my tape here. Again, I'm adding the tape on, if I can find the opening of it, there we go. On the back side of the cork, at the top of the bottom piece B, which is where the bottom of the zipper is. Do that. Sometimes I tear my tape and sometimes I cut it, and I have no idea why I change it up. But in case you're watching and wondering the same thing, I don't have an answer for you. Peel my paper off. All right. Grab piece L. This is my last piece right here. Piece L is again going to be right side up. The print is also right side up, so here's the top of it. And this one goes right here. Press that on. Fold this down and do my final bit of top stitching. And then since I'm at the machine, I'm also going to close up this pocket. So once it's top stitched, I will pull this down, sew across the bottom and the sides as far up as I can go. My pocket is just about complete. I still have one piece that I'm going to add on. So from the front, let's take a look. We've got all of our top stitching. I hope that you enjoyed the technique that we used. I know it can be a little bit awkward, but for me, I'd rather not double top stitch, like one on top of another. It's never straight for me. It never ends up perfect and it will just drive me crazy. So I'd rather just have the one line. So you can see under here, there's my zipper and there's my other zipper. I moved my pulls into the pocket. I trimmed up and kind of straightened up my edges here. Now in the pattern, it's going to give you a width and height for your finished pocket. Keep in mind that if your height is at all altered, it's not a big deal. Just trim your M piece to be the same size. If your width has been altered, and sometimes that can happen just because of shifting and trimming and different things. Let's say that this is not quite as wide as it needs to be. If it's off by just a little bit, like less than 1/4 of an inch, we can kind of fudge it later. If it's off by too much, we might need to adjust the other sizes, the other pieces to be the same size. If this is off by 1/2 or 3/4 of an inch, which it shouldn't be, but sometimes things happen, we will have to make some alterations. For me, everything came out exactly as it was supposed to, which is a miracle for me, so I'm happy. I'm all trimmed up here. On the back, I've got my two pockets. I have my taller pocket from the top and my shorter pocket. I stitched the bottoms closed. They're not sewn to each other. I stitched the sides, again, not to the front, as close as I could get them up. That way I can scoot them out of the way if I need to reduce some bulk. For now, to finish up the pocket, what we're gonna do is take our M piece. M is the last piece of cotton that is not interfaced. I'm going to place it right sides together, just like this. Yes, you can use some tape. I'm just going to use some clips. Turn this over. And I'm just adding this pocket piece to the outside. Here is my top and my bottom. So what I'm going to do now is stitch 1/4 of an inch all the way across here and all the way across here. I am stitching in the same direction that my zippers are running. I just want to close those up. And the reason is, when we look at the finished bag, we have our edge right here, which needs to be finished because that's going to be sewn onto C. We didn't want this, I didn't want this all the way down to the bottom edge. I tried that on one of the trial runs and it made the corners so bulky that it was uncomfortable even on a heavy duty machine. So we're gonna move it up a little bit. If you've made some of my other bags, you might be familiar with this. I know it's kind of similar to the Central Park sling, just kind of to give you some reference. So this will be sewn down later. This edge right here, this is my open pocket. So I have my zippered pockets, but I also have an open pocket. So now it's finished. And after I get done sewing this and I turn it right side out, I'm gonna top stitch the top edge. You can do an 1/8 or a 1/4, it does not matter. I'm going to do an 1/8 because it matches the rest of my top stitching, and that makes me very happy just to have everything nice and equal. So we are not top stitching the bottom, just the top. We're sewing the top and bottom with a 1/4 of an inch seam, turning, pressing, finishing it up, and then we'll take a look. We're done with the hard part of the bag, or at least the complex part. Then we're gonna start assembling. It's that quick. So our pocket is all set. I sewed my M piece right sides together, turned it, gave it a quick press, and I top stitched just the top edge. I chose to do an 1/8 of an inch so it matched the rest of my top stitching. I did not sew the bottom at all because that's going to get sewn onto one of these pieces in the next step. So now this is all ready. If you would like, if it's easier for you, you can also stitch an 1/8 of an inch along these edges to keep everything together. Make sure again that your zipper pulls are in, and if your zipper has opened at the end at all, you can also stitch those closed. That will definitely help for the next step. So for step 6, we're going to be adding this to the front, but first we need to cut our corners. I'm just going to move this out of the way, and to cut the corners, what you're going to do is on the back of C and D, technically also your end lining pieces, but we're not quite there yet. I know sometimes it's easier to cut all of your corners at once. What you're going to do with these is you're going to mark the bottom of both of those. And remember, your pieces are slightly taller than they are wide. So if you're not sure, double check your measurements. And on the back here, I already went ahead and I used my little box corner template, and I did my marking. So we're cutting 1-inch corners. And all I do with my template is I place it so the lines are on the side and the bottom, and I do my marking. I've done that on C as well as D. And now I'm just going to use my scissors to cut. I always used to cut my corners with my rotary cutter, but I found that I was accidentally overcutting a little bit too much, and sometimes I'm just not near a mat. So I would actually rather mark and cut with scissors. You can mark on the front or the back of your pieces. It actually does not make a difference because we're cutting on the lines. And if there's any marks left over, we still have a seam allowance. So if you find that one part of your cork or fabric is easier to see, you can mark on whichever one works for you. Move those out of the way. I'm going to get rid of D because I don't need D just yet. And I'm going to take C in my pocket. I'm going to place my pocket so it's right side facing out. My C piece is also right side up. And I need it to be 1 inch from the top. And I don't have a ruler nearby, but I have my little template right here. So I'm just going to measure and scoot this up. Just like that. I will add a clip. Do the same over here. 1 inch, just like so. All right, now straighten this up. Make sure it's not squished at all. And you'll see that it's above the corners that we cut, which is going to help to reduce bulk. That was what I was struggling with on the first sample that I made because I just wasn't thinking. My pocket went all the way down to the corners, and when it came time to box them in a later step, it was an absolute nightmare. And that is why I took it apart, redid it, and fixed it. And I won't even tell you what sample it is, but it's one of the ones you've already seen. So now that is in place, it's 1 inch down from the top. Now I'm going to stitch on the sides as well as the bottom. So I'm leaving this top edge open, that's my open pocket, and I'm just gonna stitch 1/8 of an inch. I'm gonna go down, across, and back up, and then I will be back. Step 6 is complete. My pocket is stitched onto the front. It is open at the top. It is stitched 1/8 of an inch on the sides as well as the bottom. For step 7, I've grabbed my D piece, which I just cut my corners from, and I also have my handle. I'm gonna grab a couple clips. So in the pattern, it also gives you an alternative option. If you would prefer to rivet your handle on, you can absolutely do that. You can do it now if you would like, or you can do it when the bag is done. And that might sound a little bit strange because if you do it when the bag is finished, won't you be riveting through the lining? And the answer is yes. And for all of the samples that I riveted my handle on, I did go through the lining as well. I just find that it's a little bit more secure and it's quite frankly just easier to do. Instead of having to rivet it and have it kind of be in the way, I just like to do it that way. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna sew it as the pattern shows. First thing I'm going to do is trim off my selvage, get rid of that. Now in all of my bag patterns, for many years now, I have told you that you need to have your handle hardware, your slide set, facing inward, because normally the way that we're going to turn our pieces, we would want to have it right sides together and then turn it out. This is going to be different. This is actually similar to the Alice pattern. The reason is it's going to be on the back, so when we're carrying the bag against our body, we want to make sure that the slide hardware is facing out. And in order to do that correctly, we actually need to have it facing out right now when we add it to the back. It's a little bit backwards, but it actually works out really nicely in the end. So I'm going to place my handle about an inch. I am not even measuring. I'm just kind of measuring with my heart, as they say in the cooking world. And I'm going to place my other side over here. I'll show you how this looks once I get it clipped in place. So I'm approximately an inch in from each side. My handle is not twisted and my handle hardware, my slide, is facing upright. I'm going to head over to the machine and just stitch back and forth a few times, about 1/8 of an inch. I do slide my pieces up a little bit so that they're not totally even here. I just find that that gives me a little bit of wiggle room in case I'm off at all. I can always trim it afterwards. So I just kind of slid them maybe about 1/4 of an inch kind of past the top of the bag. Well, that step was super simple, especially considering our last 2 steps were pretty labor intensive. Now the handle is stitched in place. It's ready to go, and we're going to move on to step 8. So for step 8, we're going to curve the ends of our zipper. So we're going to take them from this to this. Now, normally I would do this at the sewing machine, and that is totally okay. A lot of people like to use a stapler, but today I'm going to show you a different technique that I learned. This is actually something I learned from Jade at Heartwood and Hide. She makes amazing labels, if you do not know. So this is going to use a lighter instead of using a pin or using the sewing machine. And what I'm basically going to do is fold my zipper in such a way that I can melt my ends together and I can skip the sewing machine altogether. So what you're going to do is you're going to first fold your zipper and kind of tuck it like this. So we're folding away, we're folding towards the back. And once I have it folded in half, I'm going to take this fold and bring it up towards the part that is curving away. So I kind of grab a hold of that and bring that right up like so. That is going to be hidden when I get my sewing done. And it's also giving me the layers that I need. So what I'm gonna do is just kind of hold this. It can be a little awkward until you've done it a few times, but I just thought it was such a fun technique. And again, no sewing machine involved. So I just kind of melt my ends, keep them together nice and tight. And no, I'm not burning myself and I'm not burning my fingernails. It just takes a little bit of practice. All right, so I had to finish that up off camera because it is super hard to do it outstretched in front of you. It is like 2 feet away from me when I'm trying to show you on camera. So that is just a new little technique that I learned, and I just wanted to share that. Again, if it doesn't work for you, it's totally fine. Just take your ends and kind of turn them and get that 90-degree turn. There are so many different techniques. Find the one that works for you. A lot of people have been using a mini stapler and really enjoying that. I always have good luck just using a pin and adding some stitches. So now that our zipper is all set, I'm going to leave my end open because even though I am going to add a metal zipper end, I don't like to do it until the bag is finished because then I can trim my zipper down to the length that I want it to be. So I am all set with step 8. Let's grab our pieces and move on to step 9 and start completing our bag. For step 9, the first thing that I did was take my lining pieces, my ends, and I went ahead and I cut the bottom corners just like I did on the outside. So I have my 1-inch squares cut from both of the bottom edges. I'm just gonna set those aside for now. And on the front of my bag, it might not be visible on camera, but I can definitely see it. I've made a mark a 1/2 inch in from each side. That is going to be for my zipper placement. Now I'm going to use double stick tape. You can absolutely use clips if you would prefer. And I'm just putting my tape in between my 1/2 inch marks. Not that it makes a huge difference, but just so that I can see where I need to go, because my marks are not very dark. And I just wanted to make sure that they were visible. So I put a little bit of tape, and I'm just going to peel off my paper. So now what I'm going to do is place my zipper right side down. I'm going to start at this first 1/2 inch mark. My teeth are going towards the edge, kind of off the edge there. And if I need a clip, I can add that. I'm just going to kind of align that. Okay. Get that lined up nice and straight. And once I get down to my other 1/2 inch mark, that's where my zipper is going to kind of curve away. So I'm just pushing it down out of the way. If you're not using double stick tape, you're going to head to the machine and just base this about 1/8 of an inch. Because I have double stick tape, I'm not going to do that. That is my basting. I'm going to take one of my end pieces and place it right side down. This is going to be interface cotton for you. I am using waterproof canvas, which is totally fine as well. So I'm looking at the rubbery side of the canvas. When I get down here, I'm going to make sure my zipper is curving down so it's not getting stuck in the seam allowance up at the top on that very edge. I have my pieces in place now. I'm going to go to my machine and stitch 1/4 of an inch all the way across here, making sure to backstitch. My zipper is kind of hanging off the edge here, and it's not getting caught all the way to the end. So my first half is done. My stitching goes all the way across from one side to the other. I did backstitch, but my zipper does not. My zipper is going to be short on the curved end as well as the other end. We're leaving some room here for seam allowance. This is also going to keep the top of the bag extra straight instead of having those corners that dip down with other techniques, some of which I have used before. So now that we have this done, we're just going to fold those out of the way. And I like to keep my zipper open. I'm going to be placing my back, it's going to be right sides together, and it's going to go on the opposite side of the zipper. So I'm just going to kind of flip this over. I like to just show you so you know the positioning, because sometimes it can get a little bit backwards, and I don't want you to have anything twisted. So I'm going to place my zipper. Now the curve on the back is actually on the right-hand side, and I'm just going to place that at that 1/2 inch mark. I'm using tape again. You can baste at the sewing machine if you want. The back is a little bulkier because it does have the handle, so it's totally understandable if the tape is not working for you. I'm going to put that in place, kind of pull my zipper down on that side. Take my second lining piece, add a few clips. And what I might do is also clip my handle just to kind of keep it flat. Sometimes it just gets in the way. This is why I like to use the zipper or install the zipper open, because then I don't have the handle competing against the front. I don't have all that bulk in my way. This is just, I think, a lot easier. So one more, and maybe on my next trip, I will bring my clips back because I just keep leaving them at the sewing machine. So I have my zipper kind of pushed out of the way. Again, I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch seam all the way across here. When I'm done, I am not top stitching. That's going to be done at the very end. All right, so we are so close. We're just about ready to close this bag up. So I've got my zipper sewn to the back half as well. And before I go any further, just in case, I do like to make sure that my zipper does not have any twists in it. So I'm just kind of putting my bag right side up, just like so. And then I'm going to zip. See, I'm all twisted, but not in a bad way. There we go. I am twisted around myself. But I just like to double check, because if I've made any mistakes, I'd rather fix it now. So everything looks good. My zipper is not twisted. My lining is in. We are good to go. So now to finish this up, I'm going to open my zipper about halfway to 3/4 of the way. I want to make sure the pull is inside of the bag. I also want to make sure that the handle is inside of the bag. There's not a whole lot that I can do with this except kind of just place it there for now. And I also want to make sure that this end of the zipper is in the bag, not in the seam allowance. So what I'm going to do is put my outsides right sides together and my linings right sides together. I will address that in just a minute when I'm clipping. And I'm just going to add a few clips to get started. Everything is kind of right sides together at the moment. So we're going to add a few clips down here. And then we're going to add some clips over here. Now I will make sure my handle is inside. Well, you just don't want to stay, do you? All right. My handle is like a disobedient dog. I'm going to win, though. I will get it in there. Okay. Clip here. And tuck in. Now you're probably understanding why I like to rivet my handle on when the bag is completely done. But that's all right. There we go. Clip here. And I want to take this little zipper end and push it in out of the seam allowance. I don't want to catch that. Now when it comes to these top seams right here between the lining and the outside pieces, I have not pressed anything. All I'm going to do is kind of nest my seams. And nesting means that one seam goes in one direction, so this one's going to the left, and one goes to the other direction. So one to the left and one to the right. That is going to reduce bulk, and it also gives a really clean top to your bag. Now, you'll see all this bulk right here from my pocket. This is why we discussed in the beginning ways that you can eliminate that so that your domestic machine is happy. Would my domestic get through this? Yes. Will it be kind of mad at me? Also, yes. I may even break a needle, which is not fun. It's not the end of the world, but I would rather not. All right. I'm just adding clips because it's bulky and it wants to move away from itself. I want everything straight and pretty. My lining is not as bad. I'm not really that concerned. I'll add another clip here just for good measure. And I think that's it. Okay, so my bag is ready to sew. I'm gonna head over to the machine and I'm gonna do the two long sides. So from the lining to the outside, lining to outside. On the outside, which is my cork, I'm also gonna sew all the way across here. On the lining, I'm probably gonna do about 1 inch on either side. I wanna leave a large opening in the bottom. After this, we just have to box our corners, turn it, and top stitch. I will come back and I'll show you how to box your corners. So now that the sides and the bottoms are taken care of, the last thing we need to do is box our corners. And so if you have not done that before, it's a very easy technique. We're basically bringing this seam and this seam together and giving our bag some depth. So we're just kind of flattening that out, just like that. And adding a clip. And you'll see my seams are going in opposite directions again. Again, right here. And I just kind of give it a tug. You want to get your seam as straight as possible because the nature of this, because of the bulk, is it wants to point. We want to straighten it out as much as we can. And sometimes that's easier to do at the sewing machine when you're ready to sew. So we're just kind of bringing our corners, our seams together to make our corners. Here's our last one. We're bringing those two seams together and flattening it out. Once these corners are stitched, it is time to turn it right side out, do our final check of everything, top stitch it, and call it a day. The exciting part is just about to happen. Everything is stitched in, the corners are all boxed. Now it is time to turn. So I'm just gonna reach in and I grab the handle first, get that out of the way. I unzip the zipper the rest of the way. And when it comes to turning, I don't like to grab and just kind of yank on my bag. I just kind of keep turning it and rolling it more than anything else. I think that definitely helps to not rip any seams, and it helps to make it go a little quicker. You can also take it to your ironing board and kind of warm it with some steam. That makes everything a little softer and helps to turn a little bit easier. But once you get the bulk of it, it's not so bad. Keep pulling that handle. All right. And this is why I leave a really large opening, because I want to get my hand in there so I can poke my corners. All right. You can also use a turning tool. I'm just using my hand. Now, poke these corners out. We've got 2 things left to do. First things first, let's take a look, admire our work, make sure everything looks good. I'm super happy. Everything is constructed well and it's exactly the way it should be. So the first thing I'm going to do is close my lining. You can do that by hand or machine. I'm going to do it by machine. So I'm just turning my edges under just like so. Add a couple clips. And I'm just going to stitch about 1/8 of an inch. Then I'm going to tuck this in and top stitch again 1/8 of an inch all the way around my top edge. It can be a little bit tricky because I don't have a free arm. I'm using a flatbed machine. So a lot of times I will do this from the inside out instead of from the outside. It all depends on what's easier. Once that's done, I just have to add my zipper tab and my bag is complete. All right, it's all done. I'm so excited with how this one came out. So I have my hidden zippers in here. I can lift that up and open my pocket. What I really love about that design is not only does it give it kind of an extra feature, you almost don't even notice that there's zippers, but if you don't close your zipper completely, you have that little extra bit that's kind of hiding it and making sure that it's not exposed to anybody and nothing's coming out. So we've got our 2 pockets right here. There's my other pull. Got an open pocket in the front, great for your cell phone or anything you need really quick. I put my zipper end on, that just screws on in the back. If you don't have a zipper end, you can also finish this with a little piece of cork. Just kind of fold it on there and stitch it or even glue it. All depends on how you want to take it. I've got my top zipper. You'll see there's that little bit of a gap down here, and that means that my zipper sits nice and straight. My corners don't dip at all. On the back here is my handle. My hardware is facing forward. That way when I'm wearing it, I can see the hardware. And I'm all set. I closed my lining on the machine, and I think that's it. I'm really pleased with how this came out. I'm excited to see how your Julia Crossbodies come out. I hope that if you participated in our New Year's Eve sew-along that you had a great time. I know that I did. If you would like to watch that video, if you haven't seen it, it is basically just a live version of this tutorial with a different sample. So you're welcome to watch that as well. I will link it for you up top, but it's also on my channel. Other than that, I think that's everything. I hope you enjoyed this. If you like videos like this, don't forget to click subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching.